G'day friends, welcome to Journal Bento. Now, I just want to preface this by saying it doesn't have much to do with bento. If you don't know, bento is like a bento box is a Japanese kind of lunch box that's all compartmentalized. You've got your rice and your protein and your vegetables, and some people go really all out crazy extra ultramost plus and just do like themed ones, and the kids ones are really cute. But I will just say, ever since I watched an unboxing of the paper bento box that My Life Mitts did on YouTube, bento has been stuck in my head that entire time. Now, I'm not one to go out and purchase a box like that. As it is, I believe that those paper bento boxes are kind of like very hard to get now. So I'll let you go and check out My Life Mitts' video on YouTube if you want to go and check it out. It's a stunning, stunning box full of paper goods, but you'll see it's all compartmentalized in there. And like I said, this video doesn't have much to do with it other than the layout that I chose to teach this lesson in, and why I chose to teach it, because essentially I wanted to give you tasty little tutorial treats. These are things that come up in my journaling so often, and it's never occurred to me to teach those things before, because outside of, you know, like a full lesson, they don't really make sense just to teach the tiny little tricks and like little techniques that I do to enjoy myself while I'm journaling. So I thought this would be a great video to do. As it is, I've split it up into two parts because there's 10 little tutorials I wanted to show you. Today we're doing part 1, and this is the download that's available to you if you want to work along on this sheet. You'll see that the tutorials up here, these are some that I've already completed, but you can copy and do the tutorial in the boxes below because they'll be blank on the PDF download. I've got my red blue pencils here today. I'm going to be sketching in my sketchbook to show you the tutorial. We'll zoom right in so you can get close. The reason, I wanted to explain this quickly before we started, the reason they're red and blue is because I like to start with the red and then finish with the blue. So these tutorials work, you can see they're kind of step by step here. If you start with the red and follow the tutorial, you know, kind of left to right, but obviously like the red lines here are your working lines, and then the blue is how you're going to finish it, and they will be the lines you're left with. Essentially, if you did this with a pencil and you were going to erase it, do all the red stuff in pencil and then ink in whichever lines are still in blue at the end. I like to teach that way because step by step is fine too, but sometimes it's hard to see where all those working lines came together, and if they're still on your page, you might not know which one to follow. So the blue really distinguishes which line to follow if you are getting a little lost during the process. But you can see, I mean, I love these red blue pencils. So let's get right into it. I'm going to zoom you close and we'll go step by step through each little tutorial. Okay, let's start with twisted ribbons. I've got my red pencil here. I'm going to draw an S just across my page like this. A nice big S, because I don't want to get everything too small and then not be able to see what I'm doing. I'm going to take another S, the same kind of curve that we did, but I'm going to cross over it this time. I don't want it to go too far away from the line I just drew, but I do want to cross over it a couple of times. So you can see we crossed over here on this curve, and we crossed over on the next curve. From there, I'm going to go to the curves, and I want to join the outermost parts of these curves together with a line. So I'm just going to run that straight line across there and join those curves. Now here, those two highest points of the peak are actually kind of where the ribbon has gone around. So these are the parts we want to connect right here. Wherever there's kind of this dip, we want to connect a line from the topmost parts of those curves. We've got two pretty parallel S curves here, but if we did have them running a bit more wonky, it could be a little difficult to see. But in essence, we would still be doing the same thing. We're still connecting these two parts of the curve that are exposed in this little dip area. And again, we've got this part of the ribbon where it dips and crosses. We want to make sure that those two curves are joined. This becomes a lot more tricky to follow, so I would just suggest that when you're doing your S-curves, keep them parallel and just run them next to each other. I'm going to close off these two lines at the end, and that's it for our first twisted ribbon. When we go to line it in, I'm going to run down the outside. I'm going to pencil in blue that extra line that we added there, and then run back up the top. That's our first part of the ribbon. Now we've gone to the fold here, so you can see as we're lining it, we're going to come around that curve and the curve here that was already there. We're coming back to this line that we drew in, so we want to make sure that we've got that line nice and cleaned up. And then again, following the outline that's already here. If you were going to put a pattern on this ribbon, you want to skip every other twist. Do you know what I mean? So once you put your pattern on, wherever it twists, skip it until it twists again. And then you can put your pattern on again. That way you're seeing the top of the ribbon, then it flips under, you'll see the bottom, then it flips back and you'll see the top again. And that's how I do a twisted ribbon. I've got 2 more to show you as well. This time we're going to start with a line, and this is what I like to do with draped fabric. So it's not so much a ribbon, but more of a folded kind of fabric look. I've got a straight line that goes down. I'm going to start at the bottom of this line, and I'm going to zigzag a curve that goes up, getting bigger as I go out. It doesn't have to, but it is easier to learn it that way, and then you can start altering all the proportions. I'll do it on this side to show you how it doesn't really matter, but you might want to think about it this way first. So from this shape, we've got our zigzag line and our straight line. We're going to start at the top of this straight line, and we're going to connect it to every outermost point. So we've got this outermost point of the curve here. We're going to connect the line straight up. We've got the line where we finished, so we're going to connect it out to there. This is the outermost point down here. We're going to run a line straight from the top in the middle down to the outside. Again, we've got an outermost curve here. We're going to run a line straight down there. It actually kind of looks really cool like this. It almost looks like a transparent kind of a fold. But as we go to line it in, I'm going to just follow that curve that I drew. I'll do that first. And I'm going to start lining from the top and follow these outside lines. The reason I want to start at the top is because I'm not going to need these working lines once they've already crossed one of these parts of the fold. So I've got this first part of the fabric which I'll be able to see here. I can put my pattern on there just so I don't get confused with those lines. Now I don't need these middle lines here because I'm just following the one that goes to the outside. So this is the outermost fold on this part of the fabric. I'll just lightly sketch over that so you can see. I'm going to follow the outside to the outermost part of this one, just catching that line, put my pattern back in, and then down to the bottom where we started. And you can see that looks like a twisted piece of fabric. The reason I say to learn it like that way is because it's easier as it goes larger to smaller. We can apply the same technique and here catch each outside part, but now we're going to have folds of fabric that will kind of appear from outside the other fold. Do you know what I mean? So if I did start again, I'm still going to trace the curve and I'm still going to catch all the outermost parts, but this part here might appear behind this little fold here, just catching the outside. That's not even the most confusing example. I'll quickly do one here and just show you how confusing it can be. Yeah. So we've got our center line, we've got all of the zigzag curves. I'm going to catch every outside part of these curves, running it back up to the center. So we've got a million working lines here now. This is why it always helps to start with your curve, just so you know that line will always stay lined in, and then work from the top, catching all the outermost points. And it still works the same way, but it's just a lot more confusing. I will say that if you are interested in knowing how to shade something like this, every time it rounds, it will kind of catch more light than when it dips under. So inside each of these curves, you want to shade a little darker, and then lighten up your shading as it gets to the outside. So every time there's a curve, like a little curved in section down here, you want to start a little darker, and then lighten up as you get out to the edge. To achieve this gradient when you're coloring, just press much harder with your pencil and then lighten up the pressure as you reach the outside. Then you can enhance how that folds and it catches the light. The last one we'll do, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but we got a lot of treats to get to. Make sure you do reference the PDF if the video is moving too quickly. I'll just say that much. The last one we're going to do is very much the same as this one, and it's more of a rounded, like a scroll. So if you've got a piece of paper that's rolled up or the edge of a scroll or something, sometimes I do this in hair as well. I don't even know why, but I just really get into it. Sometimes I use this for a bit of a, what's it called, seaweed effect, or I've done this on mermaids before. I really love this kind of fluted cleat. That's not what it's called, but let's just run with it. We're going to start down here again. We're going to grab our center line that we're drawing straight up and down. And this time I'm going to do a, what's this called? A swirl? Yeah, we're just doing a swirl. The same idea as what we did with the one up there. We're going to start at the top center point of this line, and we're going to catch the outermost point of every swirl. Remember, the red is just your working lines, so don't labor too much over them. You could even put them in really lightly. I do like to go very bold when I'm teaching, just so you can see what I'm doing, but I would never do it this bold when I was actually doing it. If I were to do this same thing here, these lines would be about this light, and I'd be able to see where I was going. Once you get the hang of it, you don't even need all the working lines, to be honest, but just to teach is obviously the best thing to know where to go. Again, we're going to start by lining our swirl. So I'm going to put that in blue. So just like we lined the zigzag in the one above, we're going to start with our swirl. And the same thing, from the top center point, I just want to catch the outside. I'm just going to lightly color over this so we don't get confused by all those working lines. We're moving under this fold now, so I want the outside lines of this part of the fabric. I've got one on the right hand side and one on the left hand side. I've got the same down here, one on the left, one on the right, and I've got this middle fold here. The way that this one works, because it's wound up, the top part of your fabric, so if your pattern was you know, shaded in blue, if you were seeing blue on the top and white under the bottom, you've got the blue here, you'd also have the blue in this section underneath, and you'd have the blue in this section here. Sometimes I like to just connect this line to the side so it looks like it's all wound up together. But this is how I would do that kind of a scroll fold. So I know it's called twisted ribbons, but we've got a ribbon, we've got a piece of fabric, and we've got a scroll, but you know what I mean. I had to try and fit them all in there because I do like a mixture of all of these. Obviously, I love my ribbons for my bows. I love this for when I'm doing mermaids and kind of long hanging vines and stuff. I think this is just really pretty. And this has come in handy for random like hair and hats, and I don't know, I do put these a lot of places too. I think I've even done mermaids' tails using this. So that's our twisted ribbons lesson. Let's move on to the next one, and it is wrapped vines. So I'll bring you to this page over here. We're looking at this lesson right here, wrapped vines. I'm going to start by drawing two lines that run down the page next to each other, kind of drawing a pole, if you will. I've got this grid notebook here, so it's super handy because I can just follow those grid lines. Much like we did with this piece of fabric that's folded, we did that zigzag. We're going to do that same S-curve zigzag, just crossing that pole a couple of times. The trick to having these vines wrapped is you draw over one section and under the next. So if I was going to put leaves on here, I'm just going to do a bunch of really bad, quick leaves, as if this were just the whole vine just snaking up our page, and we've got our pole in the background here. At the moment it's in the background because we've drawn over the top of it. When I go to line my vines, I'm going to draw over it the first time, and then when I get to the pole, I'm going to stop. And this part is going to go underneath it. So I'm not going to pick that lining back up until the other side of the pole has finished, and then I'm going to line over it again. This way we've got an over and an under and an over and an under. This works for the leaves as well. So you're going to draw in all of the leaves where the vine is on top, and then as it disappears behind the pole, that's where you're going to not line those in. You can pick them back up again once the pole is finished, and then obviously this vine goes over the top, so we can just line all of those in. Then just to make sure you really see the difference here, we're going to line down the sides of this pole, and I'll just give it a quick shade on either side. If you give something a shadow on either side like this and leave the middle open, you'll start to make it look like it's more three-dimensional, like it's a bit more cylindrical. And then I'm really going to darken up these leaves that go over the top, just so I can notice when they disappear behind. Now, I don't really go drawing these over poles, but I do put these wrapped vines on pretty much everything I ever do. So this is a good one. If you're really trying to find some of those fun features that I like to play with a lot, this one, I mean, this shows up all the time. I'll mention one more thing about this. If we do the same thing over here, I've got my pole, the parallel train track lines that run next to each other. If you keep the curve just hitting the edge of that pole, it's going to look more tightly wound. Obviously this is quite loose and it disappears forward and behind, but if you're just hitting up the edges, this is a lot more effective if you want whatever's wrapping around to look like it's actually hugging whatever it's wrapping around. But the same thing still applies. We're still going to draw over one section and then skip it for that full width of the pole until we come back out the other end. and then skip it, and then come back. Obviously, wherever you've lined it in, feel free to draw in your foliage, leave it wherever it's not lined in, and then pick it back up when you see that line again. And then I'm just going to line in my pole, just so we can see it a lot better, and give it that same little edge shadowing that we had before. Just bolden up those leaves. Can be a little hard to see tone on tone, but I think you can see it. And that's a more tightly wrapped vine, which is also super effective. I like a mixture of both. That's wrapped vines. The next one we're going to look at is negative fills. Negative fills are something that I would usually do if I've drawn my image and then there's nothing else I really want to do to the page, or I can't figure out how to do a background for it. Like there's just, it's a mixture of odd little bits and pieces and I don't know what to do. I'll usually fill the negative space with some doodling. I like to draw leaves because there's something about the shape that is just, it's so cathartic. I don't know why, but I could draw leaves for years. It really, really calms me down and I'm always in a state of anxiety, so I've just got to be calmed down a lot apparently. I did make the mistake of saying once that I draw leaves when I'm irritated or I'm angry, which is true, I do that too, but I draw them other times as well. But then everyone was going through my journals and they were like, wow, you must be angry a lot. Which is not true, but it's one of those things that really takes me out of my own head. It's such a mindless shape to do. I mean, a leaf shape is just, it's an oval with 2 points at the end. Like it's just, and then you can put a line down there and then you can connect the, it's just so relaxing. I don't know what it is. I couldn't tell you, but I do love it. So the idea of negative fills, if you can see here, I've written something, literally something, on the page. We're just gonna fill the negative space. There is a bit of a technique to how I like to do it though. Everyone's going to be different. I'm going to go straight in with blue because I don't think you need the working lines for this. I like to put a bunch of random lines that will almost be, you know, vines, or they could be tree branches. They usually just look like a lot of Ys and a lot of random sticks. But I'll put them there to start with. Then as I go to do my leaf shapes, I'm going to try and bring the leaf to fill whatever section this branch is pointing towards. So I've got a bit of a section here. I'm going to try and put a leaf that fills that section here. But now I've got this much bigger section. I'm going to try and bring a leaf up to fill that section there. This side here, you can obviously see there's a lot of space. So I'm really going to try and fill it with all of that foliage. And I don't mind if all the leaves are different shapes. I don't mind if I skip some down here and then I add a big one back up here. I will generally just try to fill all of the negative space with these leaves. And it is just a really fun and relaxing thing to do. I don't think everyone will enjoy it, but if you do, I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And it's just also a really effective way to put a background on something if you feel like it needs it. Sometimes they really don't need a background, but other times you've just got random images floating in the middle of the page and you think, I wonder if I could ever finish that journal page, or I wonder if there's something easy I could do to make this look more like a finished page. This is probably one of the easiest things I could think of to do that is still effective and very, very simple. Now you might not have put in all of the branches that you needed at the beginning, like you might still have some space, like there's no leaves coming down here. So I might just feel like putting another one in there if I feel like there's some spaces missing. It doesn't so much matter if you've got like this little section here and oh no, there's no leaf. I mean, you don't have to draw a branch that comes up here just to fill it. You could if it bothers you and if that's something that you feel like, you know, making the choice to do. But there will probably be so many leaves on your page by the time you're finished, you won't notice the smallest of random spaces. And all of the leaves themselves are quite randomized, so your eyes won't really be looking for any symmetry or anything. You can really get away with a lot. I have been experimenting with something, and that is doing a vine but having different leaves on it, so different shaped leaves. And I really like the look of it. I've done some illustrations with it, but it's still something I'm trying to figure out how I like the look of it the best before I do it more often, I guess. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. That makes it sound like I've given it a lot of thought, and I really haven't. I've just played with it a bunch of times. But I don't think I've shown where I've played with it because I was doing, it was for tests for a product. But I do like having different shaped leaves on the same vine. I think for this it might get a little crazy and hectic, but it is something you could try if you got sick of doing this same shape. Or if you are someone that knows how to draw all those really great modern botanicals, you'll probably already have a library of leafy vine doodles at your disposal, and you could just, you know, randomize all of those. So what was a page of random doodles has now become a completed page of sketches. And yes, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I don't think anyone's going to want to hang this in a gallery, but for me, I might have had a really, you know, stressful time. I just wanted to sit down with my journal, do something that was mindless. This, for me, would make me so happy. Sometimes I'll even go in and I'll paint in around all the negative space, because that in itself will be another way to get, you know, a mindless activity to calm me down. Or if I had a painted background, I might do the whole thing with this Posca paint brush pen, because these are perfect for doing this. These paint markers were literally made to do this technique. And they're super matte, and they're just amazing. So I could go over the whole thing. This is, you know, in case you had a painted background and you wanted to change up the color or something, or even if you wanted to use this as, you know, maybe a background that you're not doing because you're just bored, but maybe this is a background that you want to try. You can get really mixed media on it as well. I might even like just having one of these done. I'm getting so sidetracked. I'm supposed to be teaching the tutorial and now I'm trying to finish this. Should I just leave it or should I try it? I'm gonna try it because I'm really into it right now. I'm just gonna finish this one really quickly because I've got an idea that just this one in paint will look really pretty. And I'll probably add some detail to it as well, because now I'm excited to play. I mean, I guess it makes sense that I did end up playing and finishing this, because these are things that I love to do all the time in my journaling, so. Alright, those two are still wet, so I'm kind of ruining my pen now by putting paint in it, so I'm just gonna scratch that off on the side. You get the idea, but I just had a really great time doing that. Alright, let's jump on to the next one. We've got S-curve bodies. This one seems difficult, but I assure you it's not. We've been using S-curves this whole time. I love the way my hand feels when I'm doing S-curves, and it's such a great way to loosen yourself up when you're drawing, is to make sure whatever you're doing just has a lot of free-flowing lines. So if you can draw an S, you've got this whole thing down, let's be real. S-curve bodies, I want to start by drawing a stick at the top, just a long up and down stick. I'm going to draw a circle, not a huge one, but you know, a substantial sized circle, just off to the right hand side of that. You could flip this whole thing, but just for now, let's just put that off to the right hand side. I'm going to go down a little bit, you know, not too far. I kind of want to keep these two circles close to each other, and just draw a smaller circle off to the left. It's all random placement. You don't have to have these specifically proportioned. You'll see what happens when we connect them all up in a minute. Underneath this bigger circle that we drew, this is going to become our shoulder, this is going to become our chest. I'm going to go underneath the shoulder part and I'm going to draw my S-curve right there. This becomes the sway back and this becomes the hips, and all we're going to do from here is join the top stick around that shoulder joint. We're going to connect it to our S-curve, we're going to reinforce that curve, and we're going to trace the contour down. This has become the back line of our body. This is a very profile facing body. Obviously, we can't go into how to draw absolutely every body angle right now and all of the limbs and everything, but this specific feature is something you'll see in pretty much every single drawing of a body that I do. So I thought it would be a good one to mention, just in case you've ever tried to figure out how that happened. From the top stick of the neck, again, we're going to curve our line inwards towards the shoulder and then outwards towards the outermost part of that chest circle. About the middle underneath that circle, I'm going to just run a line. I'm going to start to follow this curve, right? So I'm going to start to make train tracks that follow it, but then I'm going to dip it back in. If I go straight down, it would still work. It'd be super stylized body, so don't feel afraid to try it. But if I take the stomach out and then go straight down, you'll end up with a really expansive hip thigh area, very much like my own body. So perhaps try that if you're drawing a portrait of me, but I do like to curve it back in because I like to draw these very feminine, very fluid bodies. So I'm going to take that chest, I'm going to draw this train track parallel line, and then I'm going to make sure that I curve it back in once I get down here. I might even just run a simple line down there. Just to start adding in that thigh, because I would technically usually try and finish this. Most of the time, the easiest way to finish it is just to connect them to a point and do a mermaid's tail. You've got a simple mermaid just like that. As with everything else, we're going to take our blue pencil and outline the shape that we want to keep. So I'm going to start up the neck, I'm going to go around the shoulder. I'm really going to focus on emphasizing this curve. So if you find that even in your initial sketch, maybe your S curve was a little less S than you would want it, use this time to carve it in. You don't have to follow your working lines. They're just working lines. They just serve as guides. So I like to say that this is your opportunity to carve it out when you're putting in your final, your final outline. It's also fun just to use that as a guide and to see how you can free flow with it. So don't be so rigid and try and stick with it. Obviously, if it helps you to learn, stick with it, but also don't be afraid to, step off that path for a second. And we've got our S-curve body here. This one is also really effective to use with the sheet. You'll see it very, very clearly here, what we just did. And if you are looking to get more expressive and dynamic shapes with your body, I would really recommend having a good go at this, because it doesn't just work for side-facing bodies as well. Sometimes when I draw, like a 3/4 body, I will still use this kind of a shape. Through the past few years, this shape has gotten more and more severe, and then I've backed off it, and I go through seasons where I'll use it and then I won't. But building lots of these lines into bodies, we go through it in the whimsical illustration course. This is how you get a really dynamic pose. Something that goes from looking quite stiff and stick figure-like to something that looks very fluid, very natural. I mean, technically unnatural as well. Not many people can actually make this pose with their bodies, but, for illustration, that's what I love. We get to play with whatever we want. And I don't know why, but this shape just really speaks to me. I just love it. The last thing we're going to look at is dainty hands. And yes, I hate drawing hands, but sometimes I do include them. So I thought I would just show you what I do to trick it. I don't love to draw hands a lot. In fact, a lot of the time I'll put them behind the body so you can't see them. But if I am going to draw a hand, I usually like to draw a hand that looks like this, like a dainty little ballerina hand. I don't know if that captured. My hand's not so dainty, so... You probably wouldn't need to see that anyway. Let's start up the top left-hand side and bring a line down into our page. The reason I want to do this is because this hand looks best when it is cracked at the wrist. You can have it go straight out, but it'll look like a bit of a gnarled hand. It looks much more pretty and dainty once the wrist is kind of snapped backwards. So we do want to put our forearm in just so we can see the difference there. I'm going to start by adding a line. So it's almost like a backwards check mark. I guess if you were drawing the other arm, it would just be a check mark. I'm going to add a little dashed line right there. And then what's this called? An obtuse? Like an obtuse triangle? It's where it's much more flat on top. We're going to steal this line from the obtuse triangle, and we're going to connect it to this dash that we made. You can already start to see it forming here. We've got the forearm, we've got the wrist, we've got the thumb, and this will become this part right here. So I'm going to take our obtuse line, I'm going to start at the end, and I'm just going to bring a U shape into that negative space. I just like to go over it a bunch of times until it starts to look right. Truly, these won't look like beautiful hands, but they will get the point across if you do need to put some little hands on something. This is just a trick. This is not how to draw hands at all. This is if you're going to go into my head at journal time, playtime, these are the hands that are going to come out. So that's what I'm going to show you today. From this point, we're literally almost done. I'm going to come up past the point, the highest, like the apex of this obtuse triangle shape, and I'm just going to add a little dash just off to the top there. That's going to be our pinky finger, and then almost at the same place underneath, I'm going to add a small little triangle, and that's going to be like, you could essentially put something in there. You could put an egg in there or something. She could be holding it. Or you could put a bag, a handbag or something. I just love these hands. They're so versatile, but they don't look, super real. They get the job done though. I'm going to flesh out this forearm a little bit, and now I'm going to go in with my blue and again trace all the lines I want to keep. So I don't really want to make this a super sharp angle. When I come to this, I'm just going to curve the line so it meets a little more naturally, and then come around that curve, line in my thumb, and then swoop back off to the forearm somewhere. A lot of the time I won't really try to bother drawing any detail in this pinky finger or the fingers underneath, because technically they are behind, they're a little shadow. So I actually like to fill those in with color. So I don't need to outline those, I'll just draw over them. And then you've got a little dainty hand. The only other option I would do with this is exactly the same thing. So I've got my forearm, I've got my check mark, I've got my obtuse angle. I'm gonna bring it in with the U shape. Instead of drawing this as a flick up to the top, I might also do another obtuse angle, so that the pinky finger isn't extended straight out, it's got kind of a bend to it. I just find that it's enough of a change to make it look like a different hand without it actually being a different hand at all. And I'll just line around the edge of that quickly. Oh, it looks like it's doing that, you know, the dog face or whatever you do in the shadow puppets? It kind of looks like that. But in your drawing it might look dainty. Or I don't know, maybe you want it to do that little dog shadow puppet. That is a dainty hand from me. Those are the 5 little tasty tutorial treats for Journal Bento Part 1. I will have another Journal Bento Part 2 coming very soon, and we'll go into 5 more things I love to do in my journal playtime. I hope you enjoyed those. Please access your digital downloads for this. I think it'd be super helpful for you to have a reference to copy straight from. Again, start with the red, make sure you line in the blue. You've kind of got everything going from left to right here in your tutorial, or top to bottom down here. And don't be afraid to use this for whatever you want to use it for. Just because I show leaves in this negative fill tutorial doesn't mean you have to do leaves. You could do the same thing with words. You could do the same thing with a stamp and an ink pad. You could do, you know, technically any of it. If you have an idea that stems from any of these tutorials, I really encourage you to go with that first, because you're going to have more motivation to see that through and to really experiment in that place. So make sure you give yourself some time to chase down any of those creative frenzies you get on. And if you want, you can have a bit of a go at some of these down here as well. These are my sample pieces using what we learnt up here. So if you've had a good go at this and you think you're ready to tackle it, you can just straight up copy these as well. You can see these are the S-curve bodies. This is the negative fill. I just wrote bento in Japanese there. This is the twisted ribbons and the folded fabrics. Here you can see the wrapped vines that go in and out behind 3 different poles this time. And the dainty hands, which I flipped upside down, so technically they could be holding something as well. I don't know how you would put all of these together in one image. That wasn't kind of the point of it. See, very much unlike a bento box where the whole thing comes together to provide a nice meal. This doesn't provide a full meal. This is just treats. But I'm sure there's something that you're already doing that you might be able to work this into if you so choose. You don't have to do any of it, obviously, only if you feel like it. I better stop talking now, otherwise this tutorial will be so long. Here's everything we did today. I hope you have a fantastic time with your journal bento. Until next time, bye.